It was a Tuesday. Or maybe it was a Wednesday. I don't remember now. All I know is that the clock struck midnight, and I was the only one left in the office. The air conditioning hummed in the background, a steady, mechanical sound that had become a comfort to me during those long night shifts. But tonight something felt off. I work in a small, dimly lit office on the outskirts of town, handling customer service calls for a tech company. The building is old, the kind where the hallways seem a little too long, and the floors creak in a way that always made me feel like someone was walking behind me, even when I was alone. But it's just an office, right? Nothing to worry about. I glanced at the clock again. 12:30 a.m. Just me and the silence. Well, almost. There were the usual noises of the building settling, but tonight they felt different, louder, sharper. I pulled the headset back on and got back to work. But then, a strange thing happened. I was in the middle of a call when I heard it. A faint sound, barely audible. It came from the hallway, a shuffle of footsteps, soft, like someone dragging their feet. I froze. I was the only one here. There was no one else in the building. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just the wind outside, or a stray animal wandering too close to the building. But then, the footsteps stopped. I waited for a moment, hoping it was nothing, but then I heard them again, closer this time. They were coming from the far end of the hall, just outside the office. I stood up, heart pounding in my chest, and walked over to the door. I didn't want to open it, but I had to. I needed to know what it was. I peered through the narrow window of the door, the cold glass fogging up with my breath. The hallway was empty, nothing but the dim fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. But just as I was about to turn away, I saw something, a shadow, moving along the wall. It wasn't a person. It was too dark, too unnatural. The shadow twisted unnaturally, stretching and contracting like it was alive. I took a step back, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The shadow didn't seem to notice me, or if it did, it didn't care. Kept moving, drifting silently, as if searching for something or someone. Couldn't breathe. My eyes were glued to that shadow, watching it slink along the wall, its form bending in ways that didn't seem possible. I backed away from the door, every instinct screaming at me to leave, to run, but my legs felt frozen. There was something about that shadow, something wrong. I wanted to believe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The air felt thicker now, almost suffocating, and the hum of the building's old air conditioning seemed to be drowned out by the deafening silence that had settled over the office. I couldn't hear a single sound from the outside hallway anymore. No footsteps, no noises from the shadows. And then, just as I was about to turn and bolt out of the office, I heard it. A whisper, low and raspy. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it was clear, too clear. "Help me." The words came from the darkness beyond the door, barely above a murmur. I stood frozen, my mind racing. Was I imagining it? Maybe it was the wind again. But then the voice came again, louder this time, more desperate. "Help me, please." I should have known better. I should have just left. But my curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed the nearest flashlight from my desk and opened the door, my hand shaking as I gripped the handle. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find, but the voice had a pull, an irresistible draw. I stepped into the hallway. The air was colder out here, and the lights flickered above me. I shined the flashlight toward the end of the hallway, where I had last seen the shadow. Nothing. Just empty office doors and more darkness stretching ahead. The voice, it came again, this time from behind me. "Turn around." I spun, the flashlight beam darting across the hallway, but there was no one there. The shadows seemed to twist unnaturally in the dim light, almost as if they were alive, shifting around like they were aware of me, of my fear. "Turn around." It wasn't a suggestion anymore, it was an order. My heart pounded, but I couldn't stop myself. I turned, and then I saw it. A figure, a tall, gaunt man, standing just a few feet away, barely visible in the darkness. His features were distorted, stretched as if they didn't quite belong to a human face. His eyes, they weren't eyes at all, just black voids, endless and empty, staring into mine like they were reading my soul. "Do you hear them?" he whispered, his voice deep and hollow, like something long dead. "They're always here." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, locked in place by the dark emptiness of his eyes. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at him, my heart hammering in my chest. My throat was dry, my legs trembling, but my body refused to move. The figure didn't speak again. He just stood there, motionless, his black eyes never leaving mine. It felt like the hallway around us was closing in, the walls bending inward, as if the building itself was alive and watching. A cold, unnatural draft swept through the corridor, carrying with it the faint smell of something decaying. Suddenly, I could hear something else scratching, faint, like nails on wood, coming from the walls. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks, but then the sound grew louder, sharper, and it was unmistakable. The scratching was inside the walls, and it was moving closer. The figure didn't react to the noise. He just continued to stare, and in that moment, I realized that I wasn't just afraid of him. I was afraid of what was behind him, hidden in the walls, creeping ever closer. And then, the voice came again. This time it was different. It wasn't the same raspy whisper, but a chorus of voices, distorted and overlapping, like they were coming from every direction. Some of them were pleading, some were screaming, and some were laughing. "Get out," one voice said. "You shouldn't be here." I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead. My eyes kept darting around the hallway, searching for a way out. But there was no escape. The walls were too close. The shadows were too thick. "Do you see them?" the figure finally asked, his voice even colder than before. I didn't understand what he meant until my flashlight flickered, and then I saw them. Eyes everywhere. They weren't in the walls themselves, but embedded in the cracks, the stains, the very surfaces of the office. Hundreds of them, each one black and unblinking, staring out at me with that same hollow, empty gaze. The walls, the floors, the ceiling, they were all watching me. No, not watching, waiting. "Run," the figure whispered again. But it wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. And that was when I finally snapped out of my trance. I bolted. I didn't care what was behind me anymore. I just needed to get away. My pulse roared in my ears as I sprinted down the hall, the sound of my feet pounding on the floor echoing off the walls. I passed the office doors, the flickering lights, and the unsettling silence. But then, as I reached the stairwell, the lights went out completely. I froze, the darkness swallowing me whole. The hallway that had once seemed endless now felt claustrophobic, as if the walls were pushing in on me from all sides. And that's when I heard it, the scratching. It was louder now, much closer. Something was in the walls, just behind me, moving. Something was reaching out for me. I didn't dare turn around. I rushed up the stairs, the darkness following me every step of the way. The sound of the scratching grew louder, more frantic. Whatever it was getting closer. When I finally made it to the exit door, I didn't even hesitate. I slammed my hand against the door, pushing it open with everything I had. I stumbled out into the night air, gasping for breath, my heart still racing. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. But as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that the eyes were still watching, waiting, hidden in the darkness. And I knew in the deepest part of my soul that it wasn't over. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced, replaying every moment of that night. Every shadow, every whisper, every haunting, empty pair of eyes. I tried to tell myself it was all just a nightmare, that I had been sleep-deprived, maybe even hallucinating from exhaustion. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Something had happened in that building, something far worse than I was ready to admit. When I finally got to my apartment, I locked every door, checked every window, and pulled the blinds shut. I felt like I was being watched. Every sound in the apartment felt amplified, every shadow too dark, every creak of the floorboards too familiar. I tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. The fear clung to me like a second skin, gnawing at me, refusing to let go. The next morning, I called in sick. I told myself I just needed to rest, but I knew I wasn't going back. Not after what happened. I couldn't go back to that place. But the thing is, I had to. It was Monday morning when I got the call from my manager, Todd. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "Hey Sam," he said, "just wanted to check in. You all right? You missed your shift last night." I tried to play it off, tried to sound normal, but my voice cracked. "Yeah, I'm fine. I just needed a break. That's all." Todd didn't press further, and I was relieved. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Listen, Sam, the thing is, the security footage from last night is all messed up. It's like there was some glitch, but..." He hesitated, and I could hear him shifting papers on the other end. "There's something you should see. We can't explain it." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what he meant. I could already picture the footage, the black-eyed figure standing in the hallway, the eyes in the walls, the way the shadow had moved. It was all on tape now. I tried to play it cool, but I could barely breathe. "What are you talking about?" Todd sighed. "The footage from your shift. It shows you, Sam, walking into the hallway around midnight. But then you just stand there. For hours. Like you were frozen. And after that, there's something else. A figure. You can't see it clearly, but it's tall and it's moving. I don't know how to explain it. I felt my throat go dry. It was all real. And now there was proof. How long was it on the footage?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. "About 3 hours. After that, everything just stops. And the screen goes black. It's like the camera's just cut off." The air felt thick again, and my hands started shaking. I didn't want to go back there. Couldn't. But then Todd added something that sealed it. "We've got to have someone there tonight, Sam. It's the only shift left. Can you come in? Please. We need you." Couldn't say no. Something inside me told me that if I didn't go back, I might not ever escape it. I might never be free. I hung up, and my stomach churned. That night, I went back. I pulled into the parking lot at the office building just as the sun was beginning to set. The sky above was a dark, bruised purple, and I could already feel the weight of the night pressing down on me. The fear from the night before had never really left. It had only been buried beneath layers of denial, but now it surged back, sharp and undeniable. I hesitated before I even reached the door. I wanted to turn around, get back in my car, and drive away. But I couldn't. I was trapped in the building and in the nightmare that had started there. Inside, the office was eerily quiet. The overhead lights buzzed, flickering intermittently as I walked through the front door. The usual hum of the air conditioning seemed to be absent, and the silence was almost suffocating. I made my way to the break room, where Todd was waiting. He was sitting at the table, tapping his fingers nervously, his eyes bloodshot and tired. "Glad you came back, Sam," he said, his voice thin with a hint of strain. I wasn't sure anyone would. I didn't respond, just nodded. My eyes darted nervously toward the hallway, but I refused to look too long. If I did, I knew I'd see the shadow. It was still there, lurking, waiting for me to look. Todd stood up and led me to the security office. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of several monitors. One of them was playing the footage from my shift, the one that had been corrupted and strange. "Here it is," Todd said, pulling up a chair for me. "Watch closely." I sat down, dread creeping into my chest. As soon as the footage began, my blood ran cold. There I was, me walking into the hallway, just like Todd had said. But what came next? It was the worst thing I'd ever seen. I stood there, just as I had the night before, staring at nothing. The shadows were twisting in the background, but I wasn't moving. Not for hours, just standing there, frozen. And then, the figure appeared. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It was a man, tall, pale, gaunt, just like I remembered. But now there was something else, something even worse. There were more figures, emerging from the darkness, circling me. They were silent, but I could feel their presence, even through the screen. One of them moved closer to me, and I could see the outline of a face. But the face wasn't human. It was wrong. The eyes were empty, just hollow black pits, and the skin was pale, almost sickly, stretched too tightly across the bones. And then I saw it. A pair of eyes, not on the figures, but in the wall behind me. At first, it was just one pair hidden in the crack between two bricks. But then more appeared. They multiplied, eyes opening all around me, watching, waiting. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting, as though they were alive. The figure, the thing, in the hallway reached out and touched my shoulder. I shuddered, my own body freezing in that moment. On the screen, I could see myself react as if I'd felt the touch, despite my body being still. I could see myself shaking, my face pale with terror. The figure whispered something in my ear, but the sound was too faint to hear. The whispers on the video grew louder, and soon they weren't just coming from the screen. They were coming from the room. The walls themselves began to whisper, "Get out! Leave! Help us!" The words became louder, overlapping, until it was a cacophony of voices, each one more urgent than the last. I shot up from the chair, my heart racing, the room spinning around me. Todd didn't seem to notice my panic. His face was pale, his eyes wide and unblinking. "Sam?" he asked, his voice distant. "Sam, are you okay?" But I didn't answer. Couldn't. I was already moving, walking toward the door, my footsteps too loud in the silence. The whispers were louder now, and I could hear them even as I left the security office. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know what the footage had captured. But one thing was clear. It wasn't over, and I wasn't safe. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. Slow, dragging, getting closer. I turned to look. No one. But the shadows were moving again, slithering across the walls like living things. I couldn't stay. I ran. I don't know how much time passed. All I know is that I ran and I didn't stop. My breath came in shallow gasps, my legs burning with the effort, but it wasn't enough. The shadows were still there, wrapping themselves around me, tightening their grip as I sprinted down the corridor. The walls felt like they were closing in. Every door I passed, every office I ran by, seemed to shift, distort, as though they weren't real anymore. The building wasn't just a building. It was alive, aware of my every move. And it wasn't just the figure that haunted me. It was the eyes. The hundreds of eyes watching, staring, unblinking, from every surface. I made it to the stairwell. The door was ajar, and the dim light from the emergency bulbs above flickered erratically. I dashed inside and took the stairs two at a time, but with every step, I felt the walls close in tighter. The air was heavy, suffocating, like I was running through water. The footsteps behind me, the dragging, the whispering, they were getting louder. I reached the exit on the ground floor, but when I pulled at the door, it wouldn't open. I screamed. I pulled again, but the door stayed locked. The hairs on my neck stood up, and I felt something cold and wet brush against the back of my neck. My blood ran cold. The shadows were in the stairwell now, coiling around the walls, and the scratching. Oh God! The scratching was deafening, coming from all around me. "Leave," a voice rasped, coming from the walls themselves. It's too late. I spun, but there was no one there. The hallway stretched out before me, long and dark. The door was still locked, and then I saw it. At the far end of the hall, there was the figure again. The tall, gaunt man, his face still twisted and wrong, his empty eyes staring directly at me. This time, though, there was something even worse. Behind him, in the shadows, was a movement, a shifting mass of darkness that pulsed and expanded like it was alive. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear. The figure stepped forward. "It's already inside you," he whispered. "You can never leave." Suddenly, the lights flickered. The walls groaned. The air felt thick with something ancient, something that had been waiting for me to return. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape them. The building was no longer just a building, it was a prison. And the thing that lived in it, that thing I had encountered the night before, had been waiting for me to come back, to claim me. A loud crack echoed through the hall as the exit door broke open, but it wasn't the way out. The walls around me shifted again, bending and warping as if they were alive, trapping me in the center of the nightmare. The last thing I remember is the overwhelming silence, followed by a cold, clammy hand on my shoulder. I didn't scream, couldn't. The lights flickered one last time and then nothing. The aftermath, I never made it out of the building that night. Todd went back to check on me the next morning. When he entered the building, he said it was completely silent. No lights, no movement. The security footage showed nothing. The cameras had stopped recording after my shift had ended. But what happened after that? No one knows. They searched for me for weeks, but no one ever found a trace of me. As for the building, it's still there. And sometimes, if you drive by it late at night, you might see something. A shadow at the window, eyes watching from the cracks in the walls. You might hear whispers in the air, soft, pleading, desperate. I've been gone for a long time, but I haven't left. The building, the shadow, the eyes, they follow me wherever I go. And they're still waiting. Did you like these stories? Write in the comments. And please write what you didn't like. It will be useful for me to know your opinion. And I will improve my work. Thank you. Subscribe to my channel and click the bell so as not to miss new stories. I try for you.